Welcome to our deep dive. You guys, it's going to be a really fascinating one, all about music and the mind. You've sent us some super interesting sources, and it seems like you're really curious about how music affects us, not just, emotionally, but like physically and even cognitively, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's like a whole other level.
Exactly. So we're going to explore a bunch of things, like what's called the ISO principle, which we'll explain in a second.
Oh, yeah.
We'll even talk about how music can almost program your brain. Get ready for some pretty wild facts about how music connects to our memory, like how it can even change us physically, and some stuff about music therapy.
It's a whole field.
Yeah, and even how different parts of our brains light up when we hear music. Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. I'm really excited to unpack all of this with you. It's kind of crazy how we take music's impact for granted, but when you start looking at the science, it's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. Okay, so let's start with this ISO principle thing. It sounds kind of technical. What does it even mean?
So basically, the ISO principle means that we naturally are drawn to music that reflects our current mood. So if you're happy, you listen to upbeat music.
Right.
If you're down, you might want to listen to something a bit more melancholic, It's like music is the sonic mirror. It reflects our emotions.
So it's like when you've had a totally bad day and all you want to do is listen to sad music.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you just want to lean into it.
Exactly. And it might seem kind of counterintuitive, but there's a reason why we do that. It's not about just wallowing in sadness.
Right.
It's about using music to regulate your emotions. So listening to music that matches your mood actually lets you process and validate how you're feeling, and that can help you move through it.
That makes total sense. It's like you're saying to your brain, hey, I hear you. This is how you're feeling, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Like the music almost becomes a way to acknowledge those emotions. It's almost like talking to a friend.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. And this is why music therapy can be so effective, because therapists can use music strategically to kind of mirror and then slowly shift someone's mood to help them develop better coping mechanisms.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about listening to whatever feels good. It can actually be used to help people get better mentally.
Totally.
That's super cool. Okay, so then what about this idea of programming our brains with music?
Yeah.
I saw that in one of the sources, and I was like, what? That sounds crazy.
I know, it's pretty wild, but it's real.
So explain that.
So thinking about music as this program for our brains might seem kind of futuristic or something,
Right.
But it really taps into this very real thing, which is music's power to bring back memories and emotions.
It's so true. It's like music can literally transport you back in time.
Yeah.
Like one of the sources said that some songs can make you instantly have really vivid memories from years ago. Is there a scientific reason why that happens?
Absolutely. Music activates a part of our brain called the hippocampus, and it's basically our brain's memory filing cabinet.
Okay.
So it's super important for forming and, retrieving memories. So when we hear a song that we connect with a certain event or time in our lives,
Right.
the music becomes this key that unlocks that memory.
That makes sense. It explains why certain songs can feel so nostalgic. It's like they're bringing us back to that exact moment and how we felt then. One of the sources even mentioned this music person named Vincent James, and he tells people to make their own playlists for their different moods.
Oh, interesting.
Like he says, you should have one for when you need energy, one for when you want to relax, and even one for when you want to just have a good cry. It's like intentionally using music to, shape how you're feeling.
I love that. That's a great example of how we can use music, strategically almost, to manage our moods and tap into the amazing power that it has to, access and process our emotions.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's like a soundtrack to different parts of our lives.
Okay, so we've talked about how music affects our emotions and our memories, but what about how it affects, our bodies and even our behavior? Because some of the sources mention that, and I'm curious to hear more about it.
Yeah, that's a great point. What's crazy is that music can do so much more than just affect how we feel emotionally.
Yeah.
There's a ton of research now that shows how music impacts us physically and even how we behave.
So give me an example.
Sure.
What do you mean?
Well, I found this really interesting article from Tallahassee Memorial Health, and it talks about how people are using music in stores to actually influence how shoppers behave. So they found that younger shoppers, they like to stay in stores longer when there's instrumental music playing, but older shoppers, they actually prefer music with lyrics.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And get this, if a store plays classical music, people might spend more money on wine.
Wait, seriously? Just because they're hearing classical music?
I know, it's wild.
That's kind of scary.
It just shows how powerful music can be, and how it can affect our choices even when we don't realize it.
Right.
It's not always about someone trying to manipulate us.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just that certain types of music can create a mood or a feeling that makes us act in a certain way.
It's like music sets the scene even when we're not really paying attention to it,
Exactly. Think about it. You walk into a store and there's this upbeat pop music playing.
Yeah.
You're going to feel more energetic and probably look around longer. But imagine walking into that same store and there's calming instrumental music.
Right.
You might walk slower, feel more relaxed, and maybe buy more stuff.
That's so true. So even if we don't realize it, the music is doing its thing in the background,
Yeah.
Affecting how we see things and even how much we spend.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not just the shoppers either. Think about the people who work in those stores and hear music all day long. There's research that shows if they have a playlist with lots of different kinds of music, it actually makes them happier and they're nicer to customers.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. So it's not just about what the shoppers want to hear. It's about the people working there too.
Absolutely. It's all about being aware of the kind of music we're listening to and how it affects us and even the people around us.
That's a good point. It sounds like there's a whole science to using music strategically. Reminds me of music therapy.
Right.
Which we saw in some of the sources you sent. So can you explain, like, what is music therapy and how does it use all this stuff we've been talking about?
Yeah. So music therapy is basically using music to help people with all sorts of things, like their physical health, their emotions, how they think, and even how they connect with others. It's not just about listening to relaxing music.
Right.
It's about using music in a very specific and planned out way to reach certain goals.
Right. And it's led by these music therapists.
Yeah.
Who are trained to understand the science behind it.
Exactly.
And to use it correctly, right.
They're pros. The article from Tallahassee Memorial Health said that music therapists work with everyone, from little kids with disabilities to adults recovering from strokes or brain injuries.
It's amazing.
It is.
Like all the different ways it can help.
Yeah. And they've seen really good results helping people communicate better, feel less anxious, manage pain, and even think more clearly. You can actually find a certified music therapist near you on their website if you're curious. It's super fascinating, to see how powerful music can be for healing and growth.
It's really incredible. It shows that music isn't just entertainment.
Definitely not.
It can have a huge impact on our minds and bodies. This all makes me wonder, though, how does music actually affect our brains? Like, what's going on up there when we listen to music?
That is a great question, and it takes us into the world of neuroscience. Research has actually found that music engages way more parts of our brain than we used to think. It activates our senses, our motor skills, memory centers, emotional regions, and even the parts that help us with language. It's all this complex interaction that makes listening to music such a rich and interesting experience.
So it's not just one part of the brain that lights up.
Okay.
It's like a whole bunch of them going off at once.
Exactly. It's like a symphony of activity. You've got the auditory cortex processing the sounds, the hippocampus remembering stuff, the amygdala reacting emotionally, and even the motor areas making you tap your feet or want to dance.
That's amazing. And does it work even better when we actually engage with the music, like when we play an instrument?
Mm-hmm.
Because that PMC article we sent you, you mentioned that musical training can actually change the structure of our brains. Is that for real?
It's true. Research suggests that musicians' brains may have more connections and even be larger in certain areas, especially the parts involved in processing sounds, controlling movement, and coordinating things. It's like their brains are built for music.
Wow. So playing an instrument isn't just a hobby, it's like a brain workout.
Yeah, totally. And what's even cooler is that listening to music we love can also make it easier for our brains to access these different functions. It's like our brains are wired to respond well to music we enjoy, making it a great way to improve how our brains work and how we feel overall.
This is blowing my mind. We've learned so much already about how music mirrors our emotions, how it can trigger memories, how it affects our behavior and our bodies, and even how it can literally change our brains.
I know, it's wild.
It feels like this deep dive has only just scratched the surface of how connected music is to being human.
We've just begun. But there's more to this story. There's this whole other layer about how music connects us as people, like socially.
Oh, that's what you call the social symphony.
Yes.
I can't wait to hear about that and see where this musical journey takes us next.
Welcome back to our deep dive. It's amazing, right? We were just talking about how music can change our brain structure, especially for people who play instruments.
I know. But what about those of us who don't play anything? Can we still get those brain benefits just from listening?
Oh, absolutely. Remember, music uses tons of different parts of our brains, even if we're just listening. That PMC article mentioned how music can improve how we think, our memory, and even how we use language.
So basically, listening to my favorite playlist is like a brain workout.
Think of it that way, yeah. The rhythms, the melodies, the harmonies, it all makes our brains work hard to understand it all.
It's like a mental gym.
Exactly.
And speaking of how we process information, we talked about how music can trigger memories.
Yeah.
But can it help us make new ones too? Like, I've heard that listening to music while studying can help you remember things better.
That's true. Music can act like a little memory helper. Think about the alphabet song. It's so easy to remember because it's set to music. It's the same idea when you're learning new stuff.
So if I'm trying to memorize a presentation for work or study for a test, listening to music could actually help.
There's research that suggests it can, especially classical music. It might not make you a genius overnight, but it can create a good environment for learning and remembering things.
Okay, Mozart's going on my study playlist right now. But let's switch gears for a second. We've talked about how music affects us mentally and emotionally. But what about physically? Does music really have a real effect on our bodies?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Music can change our heart rate, how we breathe, even our hormone levels. It really affects our whole body.
So like if I'm listening to heavy metal, my heart rate will go up.
Probably.
And if I put on some calming nature sounds, it'll help me relax.
Exactly. It's how sound interacts with our bodies. Upbeat music gets your adrenaline going, makes your heart beat faster, you get more alert. But calmer music chills you out, slows things down.
It's like music has this secret power over our bodies.
Well, maybe not secret, but it's definitely powerful. And this brings us to something called entrainment.
Entrainment. What's that?
It's when our bodies naturally sync up with the rhythm of the music.
Oh, like when you're at a concert and everyone's moving to the beat.
Exactly. Think about dancing. You're moving to the music, your heart's probably beating along with it too. That's entrainment. It's how music literally makes us move. And it's not just about dancing, it can be subtle too.
Speaking of movement, I read that music can help people with movement disorders, like Parkinson's disease. It seems hard to believe that music could have such a big impact.
It's a pretty amazing use of music therapy. Using rhythms and music activities can help people with Parkinson's walk better, improve their balance, and move more smoothly. The music gives them a steady beat that their brains can follow, helping them control their movements.
Wow, so music isn't just fun, it can actually be used as therapy. Is there anything music can't do?
Well, it's not magic, but it definitely has a huge effect on how we feel. And scientists are still finding new and awesome ways to use music to make our lives better, whether it's helping with chronic pain, healing emotional wounds, or keeping our brains sharp.
This deep dive has been eye-opening. We've gone from the ISO principle and how music reflects our feelings to how it affects memory, our bodies, and how it can even be used as therapy. What's been the most amazing thing for you about music's impact on the mind?
You know, it's the complexity of it all that blows me away. Music works on so many levels. Our emotions, our thoughts, our bodies, and even socially. It shows just how powerful sound can be, shaping who we are and how we experience the world. And to think we're only just starting to understand it all.
We're back for the last part of our deep dive into music and the mind. We've talked about so much already, from how music reflects our emotions to its effects on our brains and bodies. But now I really want to explore this social symphony idea you mentioned earlier.
It's incredible how music connects us. You know, it creates this shared experience in even like a collective identity. We always say music is a universal language.
Right.
And while different cultures have their own preferences, there's something about how we respond to music that's just human. It goes beyond those differences.
I totally get that. Like
Yeah.
being at a concert with thousands of people, everyone moving to the same beat, singing along to the same lyrics. It's like music creates this connection between everyone there.
It's powerful. And there's actually research on what happens in our brains when we feel that connection. Studies show that when people listen to music together, their brainwaves actually start to sync up.
Wow. So it's not just a feeling. It's like a real thing happening in our brains. That makes me think of how music is such a big part of cultural identity and traditions. One of the sources talked about how holiday music, for instance, can make us feel nostalgic and connected to our heritage.
That's so true. Music carries our cultural memories, you know. It preserves stories, beliefs, values, and passes them down through generations. Think about folk songs, hymns, national anthems. They all bring people together within a culture.
It's amazing how music can connect us to something bigger than ourselves, whether it's a crowd at a concert or a cultural community. This deep dive has been incredible. We've learned about how music mirrors our emotions, how it affects our memories, behavior, and bodies, and the potential of music therapy. We even touched on the neuroscience of it all. As we wrap up, what's one last thought you want to leave our listener with?
What really amazes me is that we're just starting to understand how powerful music really is. There's still so much more to discover about how music and humans interact. So keep listening, keep exploring, and let music enrich your life in every way it can.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's it for our deep dive into music and the mind. Thanks for joining us.